It says we're live now.
Well, it
Um,
beats the alternative.
it does, doesn't it?
No.
It's me and Jadelet, and we really, yeah, we what we want to do is, um, it's sort of like just putting this out there for the record, so to speak. We get viewers, we don't get viewers, we don't care because we are two of these women who are slightly older than the average, and we no longer care about anything. However, there was a comment was made today which bothered me a tad, and it was yet another idea of, well, you're not a true Scotswoman, or you're not a true Christian. And I just thought, wouldn't it be interesting if Jade and I and anybody else who wants to join, and I'm not even going to just limit this to Christians, but if me and Jade just talk about, okay, what does it mean to us? Now, this isn't, we're not having a hangout to say, this is what a Christian is. That's not the point, because we can't judge any of that. It's not our place. But what we can do is talk about what it means to us. So I was going to start off with the real, stripped down to the bare bones. And for me, the first thing is that belief that you have. So it is that Christ was God made flesh, that he came down here for a purpose. And that purpose was to teach us, but more importantly, to then die for us so that our sins are forgiven. Because we can't avoid sinning. That's just part of being human. And whether you want to call it sinning or having undesirable traits like jealousy, anger, whatever, it's just all part of being human. But in that death, our sins are paid for if we accept that gift. And then he rose again from the dead 3 days later, defeating death. And if we accept him as the Christ, as the Messiah, as our Lord and Saviour, we accept that and we accept that freely given gift, then we are forgiven. We can choose to reject the gift or we can choose to accept it. Christians choose to accept that gift. And that, to me, is Christianity in a nutshell. That one wee bit. God made flesh, came down here, died for us, rose again. We accept that and we are saved. That's it. That's the bare bones. But then there's another bit of it, which comes from one of the things that I mentioned, and it was accepting that gift, believing. So it's accepting that Christ is our Lord. What does that mean? Well, Christ said at one point, and Jade can look up the various bits and pieces for me because my computer's so slow, I can only do a couple of things at once. Um, that why do you call me Lord, Lord, and yet you don't do as I teach you? Calling him Lord isn't good enough. You've got to behave as if he is Lord. So follow the teachings of Christ. And that's the hard bit. That's the really hard bit. That's where we go wrong. I'll be the first to hold my hands up and say, I've got a really bad temper. once it gets going. Oh, yeah. And I'll say things that I will regret within the hour when I get angry enough. And I know I shouldn't do it, and I know I need to get on top of my temper. And I'll go for so long being really good about it. And then something will light the fuse, and I'll go off like the 4th of July again. But to me, my faith is accepting Christ as my Saviour and trying to follow his teachings. And Jade was mentioning earlier something about what Jesus said were the most important commandments. On you go, Jade.
There are two great commandments. One is to love God, and the other is to love our fellow human beings. And we can't love our fellow human beings if we don't treat them well. It also tells us, he also tells us, to treat others like we would want to be treated ourselves. Now, I know that there are some people who play games with that phrase, but I think most of us know what that means. To treat people decently, to try to be patient, which I have a great deal of difficulty with. I also have an anger problem, and I get frustrated at people frequently. I fight that all the time, but I fight it. I try to be better. And nearly every day I go through an examination of conscience. This is something I was taught as a very small child in Catholic school. And that is to think about what you have done during the day, what your actions are, what good have you done, what bad have you done, and not just the things you have done, the things you have left undone. And again, it's not just, oh, I could have, I could have saved somebody from drowning or something that extreme. It's more, did I neglect a small kindness that I could have done? That's one I work on. There are things I think I know where I could just say something, here on the internet, in real life. And again, it's not a matter of stepping up and white knighting for someone or try to protect them. It's just that small kindness that can mean so much to people. I've seen it happen, and I've done it. I remember being in line at the grocery store one day, and the line was going really slow because there were people who had problems, and the grocery clerk was getting very frustrated, and so were other people in the line. And you could see the tension in the grocery clerk's face and body. And I got up there and I just smiled and said, "It's kind of a rough day, isn't it, when you've got people who are really slow and like that." And you could see the clerk just kind of relax. And all it took was a small word, kind word. And I also noticed as I was packing my stuff up that the people behind me who'd been increasingly frustrated and starting to mutter things also relaxed. And the first person behind me said, "Yeah, just take it easy. I know you're having a rough day." What struck me was how a simple phrase could change everything. And I think we really need to do more of these small kindnesses. Say something nice. You support each other. That's part of loving each other. And that's one of the things that I'm going to try to do more. And of course, another part of that is not saying certain things when you really want to. I've had that happen a couple of times so far today, where you just look at something and you want to go, "You are a stupid blankety blank." And I have to pull back and go, "Nope, not going to do that." And there are times on Google Plus where I see something that I just shake my head out at, and I will actually mute the post so that I don't see it again, so that I'm not tempted to go back and rip somebody's head off, because I want to. Oh, I want to. And I have to tell myself, no, don't do that. But yeah, it's a struggle, and that's just part of being human. Um, and yeah, I look to Jesus as an example, and what Jesus said. Not so much what Paul said or anybody else said, but what Jesus said. That's where we're supposed to go first.
How true is that? That's something
Uh,
that was brought up in a comment that quite often we'll find the Bible quoted at us, but it'll come from the Old Testament or it'll come from the epistles or Revelation. It doesn't come from the Gospels. It doesn't come from the words of Christ. And quite often, if you provide a passage, a little verse from, for example, the Sermon on the Mount, they will come back at you with something from Acts or Corinthians.
yeah,
And suddenly, Paul trumps Jesus, or the Old Testament trumps Jesus. And you're left thinking, wait a minute, if everything else trumps what Christ actually taught, then why send them? It makes no sense to me. If Christ is the Messiah, then what he said trumps everything else. You can't say, well, nah, we'll stick with what Paul told us. I mean, we know that Paul and James had differences of opinion. It was James, wasn't it?
yeah.
They had differences of opinion. And they were very close to the time. And Paul obviously wasn't. He didn't know Jesus. He came along after the fact, rode to Damascus, barbecued donkey, etc. Yeah, but from his road to Damascus moment, he became the great evangelist. But he had differences with James, who was the brother of Christ, who knew Jesus. They had differences. And I think we forget that even so close to the events, there were various arguments over it, what certain sayings may have meant. And we're sitting nearly 2,000 years down the line trying to work out what it meant. And why should somebody now think they've got a better handle on it than the people of the time, of the place, of the culture? I think it's harder now because we're having to look at a different time and place and culture from what we're used to. And so for anybody to try and say they have da truth trademark, I think shows remarkable and worrying pride. Oh, I know it all now. Heck, I feel as if I know nothing.
Oh, yeah, me too.
I muddle along the best I can. We all do. And we all fall down. Everybody falls down. But it's getting back up that counts and saying, I'm going to try not to fall like that again.
Yeah.
Aha!
We all make mistakes. We're going to get spackled any second now.
We are. Have you been listening in, Spackle?
No, I've been having trouble with my internet, but I'm up and running now.
Excellent.
Oh, good.
Jade, right, I'll just give you a brief summary. Jade and I have talked about, what our faith means to us, and I've given just the basic, the bare bones of this is what you believe, and it's trying to live the gospel message. It's trying to follow the teachings of Christ. It's not just saying that Christ is Lord. It's behaving as if he is. Follow his teachings. And I just wondered what your take is. I mean, we're just talking about our own personal approach here. So what about yourself?
That's a good question. So one of the things that I notice that gets often ignored, and I don't know if you can hear me because I'm on a phone at this moment. Can you hear me?
Oh
okay?
yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, so one of the things that I notice that gets often ignored in this community is certain teachings that I think are extremely valuable for a direction on how to live your life, and whether it's the Sermon on the Mount, I think that's extremely valuable. I think the Good Samaritan is extremely looked over. Because it's challenging you to love somebody that you don't particularly find lovable, that would be inconvenient to love. And I think these kind of teachings sometimes, for some reason, get eclipsed by Paul or eclipsed by some sort of legalism that I don't quite understand. And it's kind of interesting because I'm a synergist, so I should be legalistic, right? Like, but I think that it's interesting because I think kind of like what Kierkegaard kind of tries to explain, and faith, and James in the book of James, like faith is an action. It's not just, oh, I believe and that's it, but it's a way of life, right? So like because of your faith, you might be driven to love your fellow man who maybe otherwise you wouldn't feel responsible for. Because of your faith, you might walk a harder line and make choices to guard someone's dignity because you feel like that's what Christ would ask you to do. And so I think for me, faith is definitely more than saying, oh yeah, I believe. I got my hellfire insurance. It's cool. And I think there's this misconception that if you were to identify as a moderate Christian, which I do, even though I kind of cringe at the word myself, it means wishy-washy or lukewarm, and I don't think so. I think it means unwilling to make the gospel more offensive than it already is, unwilling to bash people over the head and insist that they believe exactly as you do. A lack of militance, shall we say.
Yeah, I don't like the term moderate either. Of course, I'm more of a liberal Christian, but the thing is, yeah, it's like, oh, you're just all middle of the road, and you can't make a decision. You can't make, pick a side, and that's not at all what it means. You don't have to be this hard line, every word of the Bible exactly as written, because nobody believes in the Bible exactly as written. At least, given the interpretations, word translations we have. And that's another problem we have is if you look into translations and you look into the history of translations, if you're going to get really, really picky about words, you got a problem right there. It's getting to the heart of the matter. It's getting to what the early church fathers looked at as literal reading of the Bible, not the word by word literalism, but what is it actually saying? What is the actual message of the Bible? That's what they meant. And that's what we have to search out for. It's not laid out for us in simple terms. Some people seem to think it is, but it isn't. And if you can find out that they really don't think of it in simple terms. It's our job to try to figure this out. And it's not easy. And at the same time, we have to try to be patient and kind, and that's not easy. Especially when you're sometimes beset by all sides, it seems like. but this is the road we've chosen. And we've freely chosen it. As Fiona said earlier, you can choose this gift or you can reject it. But if you choose the gift, that doesn't mean that it's going to be easy. It doesn't mean that you're automatically, accepted into into heaven at any point. And we just have to do our best to try to do what's right as we see it. Read again the words of Jesus. Let's go to what Jesus said. Um, yes, there are a lot of good things in Paul and in the others, but it's what Jesus said that's most important. We're Christians. We're part of the new covenant, not the old covenant, not the Old Testament. And the Old Testament is almost more historical. It's what it took to come up to Jesus's birth. There are a lot of good lessons in the Old Testament, but the New Testament is at the heart of Christianity, and it's Jesus's words that are at the heart of Christianity, not Paul's or anybody else's. And we also have to remember that when Paul was speaking, these are the epistles, these are letters. He's writing letters to different groups of people for different reasons. And for us to understand what Paul's saying, we have to realize he's writing these letters to these different people. And not just automatically assume that everything in Paul is written for everyone. The best example I can think of there is Romans, where you have people, certain people tell atheists that, oh, there's a God. It says right there in Romans, that God exists. Written to apostate Christians who had fallen away. So when Paul is saying to them, that God exists, he's talking to people that, they know that God exists. He's not talking to atheists. He's not talking to agnostics. He's talking to these people, this particular group of people, and saying, that God exists. So it takes work. And there's no golden ticket. There's no magic. Yeah. I mean, yes, believing in Jesus puts us on the path, but we still have to walk the path.
Yeah. And here's something that I've said so many times. Yes, there's that one path, but there are many ways to go along that one path. And some walk, and some run, and some skip, and some jump, and some do cartwheels, and some ride a bicycle while playing a trombone. But they're all still going along the same path.
Right. And some stop and go and pick wildflowers now and then.
Yeah. But
but yeah.
But we are all on that path. And who am I to say to somebody, excuse me a minute, but do you really think you should be going along on your bicycle playing that trombone? You're going to have somebody's eye out with that. It's up to them to find their way along that path. What's the best way of them progressing along that path? Some people might want to run along it, and others aren't able to run along it. They have to walk.
And some people trip over every blasted stone in it.
Yeah, and then there are others that hide round the corner and stick a foot out to trip you up, or shove you off the path. And yet they're on the same path as you. But they'll happily shove you off the edge.
And instead, we should be encouraging everyone who's on the path. And we should be encouraging them to ride the bicycle and play the trombone.
Yes.
Just because it's not, just because we're not coordinated enough to ride a bicycle and play a trombone, it doesn't mean that it's not right for them.
Yeah. And I think, and that's because, we are all individuals. And we all do say that we have ourselves personally a relationship with God. And so no two people are going to have that's the same experience because they're individuals. For example, I mean, when I was teaching, I would be able to explain something to one student a certain way, but come to another student and I'd have to approach the same topic in a different way because they had different ways of understanding. And I think God comes to us like that to, he pitches the message to the person. And the other thing that I think bothers me is that I think there's an idea that unless your faith dots every I and crosses every T and it's absolutely perfect and it's spot on and it's right and it's squeaky clean and shiny and all the rest of it, if it isn't that, then it's not good enough and you will be slapped down. But God knows we're not perfect, otherwise he wouldn't have sent Christ. So why would he suddenly be expecting perfection now in our faith? If he had to go so far as to send Christ to die for us because we are so hopeless.
And not just to die for us, but to leave us the message.
Yes.
To speak to people and to give us the good news.
Yeah.
That
gift is there for you.
Right.
But it's not forced on you. You have to choose to accept it. Which gets me back to my getting on the bus and the bus fare analogy and somebody offering to pay your bus fare for you. And you can accept or you can reject. You'll still get to your destination. But in one of them, you pay yourself. And in the other one, somebody else paid it for you. So you can choose to accept or reject the gift. If you reject that gift, then you've got your own doings to pay for yourself. It's not paid for you. You will pay for them yourself. And for me, that means that a reconciliation with God is possible without the acceptance of that gift. You just have to do the paying yourself. I can't see any other way to reconcile that.
But by payment, you're thinking like purgatory?
I suppose in a way I am. And I'm not going to give any scriptural support for this. This has just come from my years of thinking about this and also thinking about the nature and the character of Christ and of God and what Christ taught us. And I don't claim to be right about it either. I could be completely wrong. I could be so wrong that it's upside down. And that's why I'm only talking from the personal level here. I wouldn't be, there is no way that I would be saying to people, here, this is what God meant. Because I can't know the mind of God. I can only, as I said, stumble along trying to do the best that I can. But yeah, that's, I mean, I can't even fully explain it and start getting into all these various terms about eternal lakes of fire and purgatory and all the rest of it, because I don't know. And I'll freely admit I don't know. I believe, though.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
Yes, yeah, it does. Just God created us. God created humanity. However you want to, whatever way you want to look at that. Um, we were part of the plan, and God knows exactly how fallible we are.
Yeah.
And God knows that we're always going to fall short. Given the tools to, stand up again and keep going. And
To
that's what we're supposed
recognize
to
when
do.
we've fallen short.
Exactly. And
I
it's
think maybe that's
just,
half the trick, Jade,
yeah,
in actually knowing. Because sometimes you do things that at the time seem
oh yeah,
reasonable, and then you look back on them a week later and you think, "What was I thinking?"
yes, yes. Ah, it's yeah. Sorry, it just reminded me of something. It's like what I call the gold paint analogy now. Um, a while back, I was on Amazon and I found this gold spray paint for sale, and I thought, oh, that's
Found what?
perfect for something or other. Gold spray paint for sale.
I'm scared to ask. Gold.
Well, here's the problem. I bought it, right? Because I thought, oh, this is perfect for something. But I'm not a gold spray paint kind of person. The thing is, when the spray paint got here, I've got it sitting here. I have no freaking clue what I wanted it for. None whatsoever. Why? And I'm not a gold spray paint kind of person. Why did I order on earth did I do that? I'm certain I had some purpose in mind. But yeah, it's the same sort of thing.
Yeah.
What was I thinking at the time? What on earth was I thinking at the time? I don't know. And I can only say, I haven't a clue. I told a friend of mine about this, and she just looked at me and went, gold spray paint. And I said, yeah. And she just couldn't stop laughing.
Oh, look, surprise,
Um,
gold spray paint.
yeah. I have no idea
Christmas candles.
what I wanted it for. It was only $3, but still.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yes, life is like that. We do things, and at the time, there was a reason.
Yeah.
But later, it's like, what?
Mhm.
What was I thinking? Why on earth would I do something like that or buy something like that? Yeah, I have no idea.
Do you know, I do that
Maybe
stuff.
someday I'll come to some knowledge of what it was for, or I don't know. I don't know. But yeah, we're curious creatures, aren't we?
We are, and we do this all the time. And we look back on what we've done and we think, that has possibly not been my best laid plan.
Yeah.
And you think, right, next time round, we'll approach that in a slightly different way. Or, we look back at what we've done and we're ashamed
Yeah.
because we know
Oh
that
yes.
what we did wasn't nice. We've maybe
Oh,
treated somebody.
or
Um,
what we.
I'll hold my
Oh
hands up to that.
yeah. Or what we didn't do.
Yeah. And I mean, I'll hold my hands up to that once I get my dander up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but you see, in a way, I suppose one of the things I want to sort of get round to, we were talking about, aha! We were talking about those that want you to dot every I, cross every T. It must be done the same way. Get on your bicycle and play your trombone, and there's no other way to do it. Um, there's something that's been annoying me a lot, and it's I always go to judge not lest ye be judged for with what measure that passage. And every time I bring that up, I'll be told, but we are supposed to judge. We're supposed to judge righteously. So that set me off saying, okay, so what does it mean to judge righteously? And I puzzled about this one for a while. What would make a judgment righteous? And then it dawned on me. And if you go back to the first passage I mentioned, it tells you that once you've taken the dirty, great big forest out of your own eye, then you can get the speck of grass out your brother's eye. That's righteous judgment.
Mm-hmm.
To judge righteously, you have to be righteous, and none of us are in that position of having removed the entire forest that we've got in our eyes. And until we are perfect, until we have no sin, then we should not judge another person. And we'll never be in that position.
Right. We don't know else's heart or their soul. We don't know what they've been through. We don't know how difficult their path is. Perhaps they're stumbling over all those stones. Perhaps they've fallen off their bicycle and broken their trombone. We don't know. And because we don't know, we don't have the right to judge. We don't have the right to judge their faith. That's for God and God alone.
Now, there is an element of, I'm going to play kind of devil's advocate, so to speak, devil's advocate. There is an element where it does talk about judging righteously and watching out for false teachers.
Mhm.
And there also is the fruits of the Spirit, which are love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, and self-control, which amazingly sounds a lot like virtue ethics, which is kind of interesting. But, like, those are all, to me, instead of using that as a weapon against somebody else, maybe we should look at it introspectively to us, because I fall into this sometimes. I get, like, you know, told I'm lukewarm, I don't want to offend people, I'm Rob Bell. I like Rob Bell. Thanks for the compliment. but I'm told a whole bunch of things, and then I'll find myself, I'll be like defending myself, you know, well, you know, I am a Christian, you know, and then, like, I'll start comparing sins with other sins, and I'll find out, like, these fundies have cheated on their wife. These fundies have, you know, stolen. These fundies, you know, you take Jesus very seriously, don't you? You know, and I get real irritated by it. And then I think, you know what? My standard isn't them. My standard isn't an atheist. My standard isn't a fundy. My standard is Christ, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which I will always fall short of. So I think sometimes I get sucked in, and I'm being real honest, I get sucked into comparing myself to another Christian and playing the game with them. And I'll start throwing rocks back. And I don't know, Fiona, if you feel like you've gotten there, or Jade, but just in my own experience, I feel like I've gotten defensive and been like, well, what about you? And
yeah,
it's a really bad habit, because if you look at our standards of behavior, if we're supposed to mimic Christ, and we're supposed to have the fruits of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, and self-control. Well, I failed all of those in the great debate in front of everybody.
Yep, we all have, I think.
yeah.
You know, and I've also at times succeeded. So it's something to keep in mind who our standard is. It's not our neighbor.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, see, I think that's what I was trying to get. Oh, you better talk, Jade. I've lost my sound.
Oh, okay. You have? Okay. Yes, exactly. Our standard is Jesus. It's not other people. And I've fallen into that too, Deirdre. I've left comments. You know, it's basically to that effect. Oh, what kind of a Christian are you? You know, because but just because someone is attacking someone else's Christianity, for me to attack their Christianity. But it's so tempting. And it's so tempting sometimes when someone throws out a Bible verse to, you know, counter it with others, or to say something like, well, did you bother to read that in context? You know, to come back and the thing is, it's one thing to have a discussion and to bring in, okay, well, you said that in that Bible verse. Let's look at the whole thing in context, and so on and so forth. It's another thing to do it in anger.
Mm-hmm.
That's my problem. And that's what I try really not to do. Try not, which is one of the reasons you will rarely see me Bible verse, because that leads me down a path I don't want to go, because I'm going to start, flinging stones and they're going to be wrapped in a Bible verse. I don't want to do that. I don't want to play this sort of game that some people do. Oh, yeah? Well, here in Luke it says, well, you think that's something? Over here in Paul it says, yeah, well, you think that's something? Let's go over to Daniel here. And that's, there's one thing about having a calm, rational discussion and say, well, this is the reason that I've come to this conclusion, or this is the reason that I think that. But unfortunately, that doesn't tend to seem to be the way it goes on G+. It's these rocks wrapped in Bible verses from all sides. And I don't think that's very constructive. And it's a real temptation for me. So I try to avoid that sort of discussion. You're muted, Deidre.
I'm very talented. Do you know the story in the Bible?
No, I don't know. I'm sorry, I couldn't resist.
I'm hearing myself through your speaker, I think, and it's freaking me out. It's like stadium level. So,
okay, hang on. Let me mute myself.
I'm such an auditory listener person that it's so distracting when I hear two things going on at once. But anyway, there's a story in the Bible where the two disciples are arguing, and they're like, "What about him? What's his place gonna be? What's gonna be his story?" And I believe Jesus says something to the gist of, "What's it to you?" Do you remember that? I can look it up to be more exact, but I think there's a lot of times where people do a comparison again with one Christian to another, and they're like, well, why are you blessing that person? What about me? And I think it's a reminder that we do have our own individual paths, and while I think we're called to community with each other, I think there's this bad habit of exactly what you're not supposed to do. You ever see Chariots of Fire and they're running the race? And I think Abrams, I want to say it was Abrams, was in training, and his trainer was showing him things not to do. And he showed how the American runner lost a race because he kind of showboated and looked to the side as well. Like, am I ahead of the guy next to me? And because he looks at the guy next to him, he slows down and he loses the race. And I think that's something to keep an eye out. Is I think that we have a habit of sometimes looking at each other and going, well, am I ahead of this guy? How am I faring against this guy? And again, I think that's not the standard that you're held to. So, and I'm just talking about my own personal experience that I've fallen into that, and I feel like there are people that have fallen into that have thrown rocks my way. But that's what I think. It's probably better to keep your eyes on your own paper overall.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's a good analogy. And long ago, I used to race. When I had knees at work, and basically I was told, don't think about what anybody else is doing, because it's just going to distract you. But yeah, we're going to compare ourselves with other people, because that's just human nature. We need to check that, and we need to, why am I comparing myself to someone else? It's not always a bad thing in some ways. If you're engaged in intellectual discussion with someone and you realize, wait a minute, they've gone far ahead of me, I think I need to do my research, that sort of thing. But when it comes to faith, no, let's not judge other people. Let's not compare ourselves to other people. Let's just do our best on our path. But when we do see someone having a trouble, let's try to help them up, try to bolster them, even as a kind word. even if you don't know what to say, just the kind word, the commiseration with someone who's going through the same human life that we are, and dealing with all the same difficulties that we are, possibly, possibly even worse ones, because we don't know the demons that other people fight.
That's so true. And also, I mean, what Deirdre was saying there about, we're not in a race. We're not trying to see that we're better than others or anything like that. I think, I mean, for me, the issue is the continual attacks on your faith because you believe differently. I've always tried to make a point of never getting into one of these shit-flinging contests. You're not a real Christian. No, you're the one that's not a real Christian. I never say that about anybody. I did it once. I said to somebody, I don't think you're a Christian. And the following day, I made a video apologising for having said that. Because it's not my place to make that judgment. It is not my place. Only one can judge anybody's faith, and it's not me. And so I've been very careful never to go down that path. And I make an effort to not even think it to myself about anybody. I think that the strongest I would ever say is, I think you're a bit confused here about what Christianity is, but I would never say they weren't a Christian. As I say, it's not my place to judge. I can, if they are teaching, I can choose to reject that teaching quietly myself. I wouldn't say you're not a Christian.
I do say something close sometimes. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, it's just that if I start to judge someone else's faith, then I can expect my faith to be judged. And I can't know what is in someone's heart or in someone's mind. I can't know if they've just expressed themselves really badly and it's come out wrong. I can't know that because I can't see into their heart. So no matter what someone is saying, and no matter how maybe horrible I find it, I can't say, you're not a Christian. Because I can't know all the pertinent information. And as one of the two you pointed out earlier, we don't know what other things are going on in other people's lives, let alone what's going on in their heart or their mind. Only one person can know that. I say person. But only one can know that and make that judgment. And it's not us. And for that reason, I won't go down that road. And because I think there is always a possibility that when you start to do that with someone's faith, and if their faith is in any way weak, you can push them out of their faith. And I would never want to be responsible for having done that. Sorry, on you go, Deirdre.
I will say that there's a certain point where I would say if you, and if I'm asked the opinion by somebody that says, hey, I'm a Christian atheist, I'm a Christian deist, I'm I'm a Christian and I'm a Jehovah's Witness. I would say that there's a certain point where I would argue that you leave the confines of Christianity. Does that mean that's the end of the story for you? And, you know, I'm here to judge and condemn you and tell you, you know, no. But I think that there's a certain point, if people were honest, you can go to a certain point where you're leaving the confines of Christianity. If you believe that Jesus is not literal, he never existed, or he isn't the Son of God, I would argue you've left the confines of Christianity. So I'm actually willing to say that there are some points where, you know, there would be a certain, just please be honest and call yourself something different. But I'm not really into throwing rocks, but that would be an honest answer when confronted with, you know, I have this idea, like I would argue Spong and Borg, if you read them, I would argue they're outside of the confines of Christianity. I think when something becomes completely vague and everything becomes metaphorical and God may or may not interact or exist, I think that's kind of, I think it's dishonest to call yourself a Christian. So I don't know. Maybe I'm judgmental. Maybe I'm super judgy. I don't know.
I don't think so. But I haven't seen you use that as a stick to beat anybody with. And I think that's maybe the distinction in a way I'm making. That, I mean, I think just today alone, I've had that chucked at me 3 times. 3 times. And I haven't even been very active. I'm trying to sort of find the words for this. Usually I can find the words quite easily, but tonight I'm struggling with the words. Or as my husband says, you've got trouble with your worms. I think when it gets used as a big stick, when you reach the end of a line with, say, a discussion topic, and somebody's not a happy bunny, and they throw that out at you. Do they really mean it? I would say some of them do. And I mean, there are those that, I'm right, you're wrong, you're going to burn for eternity in the lake of fire. End of story, no discussion. That's it. And I wonder if that sort of thing is one of the reasons why we don't have as many moderates participating in the community anymore. I do know of some that have just moved away from it because they got sick of it. They got sick of this continual beating over the head with a stick. You're not a real Christian because you are not of exactly the same beliefs as me. Does that, as Hogtie Champ likes to say, have a chilling effect on the community and what we like to talk about? I mean, I've found it very daunting to host this hangout and to actually talk about it. Mainly because I can see that I could be letting myself in for a heck of a lot of pain. But I think it needs to be, I suppose that our position needs to be explained in a more forceful way, instead of just, you know, sitting back and saying, yeah, right, on you go. Say what you want. And we have to, say, no, wait a minute here. There are many, many people who would like their voices to be heard, who would like to come and talk about their faith, and they don't do it because of the chilling effect. Thoughts?
Well, when you're in a discussion with people and you tell them you're a Christian, and then you tell them you're a Catholic, and they say you're not a Christian, it's kind of hard to go from there to have a discussion. It's okay if that's what you think, fine. And then they try to tell you what your faith believes when that's not true. They bring up the usual straw man is that Catholicism is works-based salvation. And why is that so important to some people? I don't know. But yeah, it's hard to have discussions, just reasoned discussions, without someone bringing up this stick and beating you with it. I'd be more than happy to discuss differences with reasonable people. But that's what we find. It's not a conversation. We find being hit with accusations. And again, it's the whole thing. If you're a moderate, you're lukewarm. No, moderate Christians can be very strong in their faith. The idea that you're somehow lukewarm or just going down the middle of the road is absurd. No, especially I put so much work into this. Seriously, I've read a lot of the early church fathers. I've read Thomas Aquinas. I've read some theologians. I've thought about this a lot. I've listened to lectures. And again, I've thought about this a lot. This is, you're working it through your head. So I put so much work into this. And then to have someone say, oh, you're just wishy-washy, middle of the road, frustrating, no end. And they don't have a clue because they really won't talk to me.
I relate to that a lot.
Yeah. Having a conversation means both sides talk to each other and listen to each other, not talk at someone.
Yeah. Now, here's something that you might find interesting. And this name is only being mentioned for this one example. In fact, it's not an example. It actually happens. And it was when I met G-Man in New York. And we were sitting in a restaurant. And I got the most ridiculous looking plate of huge ribs that you've ever seen. But I was sitting beside G-Man. And he was asking me, I can't even remember what it was he was asking me about. And so I explained my position to him. And then I asked him what his position was. And he told me what his position was. And not once in any of that did he say to me, you're wrong. Or did I say to him, you're wrong. Two people explaining their position. And that was it. Then he understood where I was coming from. I understood where he was coming from. And that's what the conversations should be like. But they're not. Which is really sad. Because I would like to know about other people's beliefs, where they're coming from, how they try to translate their faith in Christ into their everyday lives. But we never have that conversation. And I think we miss out a lot by hearing all these various different opinions, because I think there are a lot more opinions out there than we are hearing. Because we're too busy fighting. What's that noise?
I think Jade accidentally dropped out. She'll be back.
What do you think? I mean, do you understand what I mean? An exchange of
Dialogue?
ideas. Yeah.
Dialogue. But see, people are afraid of competing ideas, right? So it's threatening to them. They're afraid of hell. That's really what it is. They're afraid if they are just heretical enough, or if somebody else is heretical enough, they're going to be cast in the lake of fire. It's going to cost them their lives. And so they are afraid of any competing ideas. It's terrifying. It's scary. I mean, that's where I think it is. I think it's honestly fear of hell. If you talk to people that are real rigid, you'll find out they're very afraid.
But why? That's the question. That
I think that's true.
I agree. But do you think that they're afraid that if they hear another idea, they may be dragged off onto the wrong path?
No, you'll hear Christians say bad company corrupts.
Yeah.
You know, which is in the Bible. I think it's in Corinthians, maybe Colossians. I'm not very good at addresses, but I know a lot of Bible verses. I have to dig through to figure out where they are. But you know, like you'll see you know, Proverbs and things like that do talk about, you know, not spending your time with fools, you know. And I think there is sort of a fear that people will sort of get airborne AIDS, so to speak, like sins that they're gonna catch, you know. And people are really scared sometimes to interact with people that are really different. Now there are exceptions to the rule. I talked to All for His Glory last night, who's a Calvinist, and I think he's rather militant sometimes, but he's not really afraid to spend time with people that are very different than him. Mm-hmm. So there are very exceptions for sure, but there are some people. I think that there is actually a fear of catching the heresy, so to speak.
Yeah.
See, I'd be more afraid of getting something wrong because I didn't think, because I didn't do the work as, you know, as I was originally taught, that it's our job to think, to figure these things out. As you know, I was once told in high school, you know, my Catholic high school, the highest law is that of the educated conscience, which means you have an obligation to educate yourself. But the conscience side is you have an obligation to think about what you've learned. And if you come to a particular decision by, you know, you doing that, by researching, by thinking, by doing the work, then God will judge you fairly on that. We're fallible. We're going to make mistakes. Maybe you do go down the wrong path, but if you do so honestly, I, you know, find it incomprehensible that God wouldn't understand that.
Well, see,
you've done your very best you can.
That brings me back to what was saying earlier on, that we are so good at messing things up, and we are so bad at getting things right, that God had to send Christ. So he knows, obviously, what we're like. So why would he expect us to get faith absolutely right and hold us to that standard when he knows what we're like? That we fill things up more often than not. We get more wrong than we get right. And yet he would hold us to the standard of we must be absolutely right about our faith. And
you see,
every jot and tittle.
You see, I'd be more afraid of God asking me, why didn't you? Than God asking me, why did you?
Good point. Yeah.
Well, we have a lot of theology nerds in this community, and by that I don't mean the clown car posse, but I mean like the Calvinists and stuff, and some of the Catholics, complete theology nerds, and I think theology is great and it's interesting, and I like how Jade has positive things about educating your conscience and growing in knowledge and actually investing and sinking into the faith that you're supposedly subscribing to and understanding church history, which a lot of Protestants don't seem to understand church history, which is kind of interesting. So anytime there's something that's icky in church history, they like to pretend like, well, they weren't really Christians. Just wipe it away. But I actually think it's really important to understand how things fit together, and what influences what, and why someone like Thomas Aquinas is really important. Thomas Aquinas does say, hey, guess what, guys? It's okay to get reason outside of the Bible. And now modern day evangelical Christians seem to go, it's not okay to get reason out of the Bible. And you're just like, like it's outside of the Bible. I mean, and I'm just like, what? So I think understanding how things fit together and the good and the bad and the ugly, I think, is important. But I also think that there's something to be said about actually living your faith. And you can educate yourself and be the most theologically educated person in the world. You could be an atheist. You could not believe in God, not believe in Christ, but you know all about him, that is definitely possible. But I think there's something to be said about actually keeping it pretty simple and kind of having a Kierkegaardian faith, like feed the poor, take care of the widows, actually love thy neighbor, loving people in a practical way, being Christ, little c, being a representative of Christ by loving people in a practical way. Doesn't necessarily mean you have to become a missionary or anything like that, but just, to me, that has a lot to do with Christianity than studying, what John Calvin has to say. But there's nothing wrong with studying John Calvin, more power to you. But, if all you can do is spout Calvin and Spurgeon or Aquinas and Augustine, but you're not actually taking care of anybody in a practical way, then you're failing, right? We're missing the mark. And I'm not trying to use that as an accusatory thing, but I'm saying, like, to me, faith is not just reading and studying, and faith isn't just believing and going, do you believe? I believe. But it should be something that's carried out, like it's an action, as opposed to just something in my head, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And it reminds me of the difference between St. Augustine and his mother Monica. And I've had this yeah, you see where I'm going, because I've had this conversation before, and
I'm a St. Monica person.
Yeah, see, St. Augustine, one of the reasons he originally rejected Christianity, because he didn't see the intellect in it, and then he wandered around, researched, and came back to Christianity. All the time his mother Monica was praying for him. And so Augustine was like the consummate intellectual. His mother Monica, and he felt that that's what was really, I'm sort of, paraphrasing here because somebody's going to go, well, nah. Okay, but he really felt that was important, that seeking out the truth, that figuring it out. He wrote over 1 million words. I've been through most of them looking up a stupid meme. And that's a lot of work. And to him, that was really important. But on the other hand, he had the example of his mother Monica, who had a far simpler faith. A faith that went to the heart of what it meant to be a Christian. And Augustine had a little bit of trouble with that because his approach to things, you know, but he had his mother Monica as a balance there. So he could understand the simpler faith. And I'm more of an Augustine than a Monica. And I wish I was more of a Monica. And I remember that all the time. And yeah, there's more to it than just reading and educating yourself. And to me, educating yourself means to the best of your ability. To the, you know, in the best way you can. And educating yourself doesn't just mean reading books. It means reading people. It means listening to people. It means thinking about it. It means asking them questions, decent questions, not accusatory questions. There's lots of ways to educate yourself. But for me, yes, it's my makeup that I have to go the intellectual route because that feeds my brain. But at the same time, I have that image of Monica before me always. Monica and St. Francis of Assisi, to help, you know, humble me, to help remind me that that's not all there is. That's just what works for me. But also, to going back to something else you said, is going back to the earliest church fathers who believed that God gave us two great books, the book of the Bible and the book of nature. And we're supposed to learn from both of them. And they can't contradict because they're both of God. So even as St. Augustine said, if you find a problem where, if you find a situation where your interpretation of the Bible conflicts with what you see in nature, well, you need to be more careful about what you're seeing in nature. You be careful about what you're seeing in nature. But you also have to take a second look at your interpretation of the Bible because you, being a fallible human, could be wrong. That's why we have reason. We're always going to be outside of the Bible because we're always in our heads. We're always using or at least we should be using our reason. We shouldn't be putting on, you know, blinders, and we should be always looking and thinking and trying to do our very best. But yeah, congratulations for being a Monica, by the way. I really like Monicas.
Yeah, Max and I have a running joke about that. He's Augustine and I'm Monica.
Ladies, I'm going to wrap this up because I'm getting really tired now. Listen, I want to thank both of you for coming along and having this conversation, because I think it's a conversation we've all needed in a way to have, and to talk about our own faith and not to have others telling us about our faith, but also what it means to us at a personal level, not in an authoritarian way, but just at a personal level. And I think I'll close this out. If either of you want to say anything before I finish this off?
Well, yeah, I would love to have some, you know, nice reasoned conversations. A number of years ago, we actually had an atheist Christian Bible study. And Gary, Phony Beetle Maniacs, and I were in it. And so was Rick Gate and Shar, you know, Rome Beans. Mm-hmm. And, you know, some other people as well. And it was really nice because everybody was very respectful. And everybody asked decent questions. Mm-hmm. And we're willing to listen to the other. And, you know, that'd be a lovely thing to do again.
Yeah.
You know, just to have a nice conversation. And you know, go through something. You know, to pick one.
There's
and just.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. I'm stepping on you.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say there's two people in our community that are agnostic that know the Bible very well, or at least they're grasping concepts extremely well. Actually, I can think of a few people, but a couple of people that do stand out for me is my friend Renee. She knows the Bible really well, better than a lot of Christians do, and she gets the concepts and can put them together in action better than a lot of Christians do, which is kind of interesting.
And then there's Frank, if you know Frank, who's in the Great Debate community. He's got the glasses.
Mhm.
I don't know his last name. It starts with a D. Shame on me. But he shows up in Baldy and Max's hangouts a lot, and he's got the patience of a saint. Like he's amazingly patient with people, and he really tries to be the most charitable person in the world. And so it is possible to have these conversations with non-believers without mockery, without you know, some barrage of offense going both ways, or immediately, you know, yelling Jezebel spirit at somebody because they asked a question that you find to be offensive in some way. You know.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because it's to make Christianity more exclusive and more offensive than it already is. To me, doesn't make a lot of sense. It is already offensive to say to an atheist, I believe that there's one God, and Jesus is the one way, you know, to everlasting life. Immediately, if I say that, I'm immediately offending a whole bunch of people. I know that. You know, the gospel isn't not offensive. It's considered good news, but it's offensive. But if I add offense on it by my behavior and being exclusive and being ultra defensive and freaked out and assuming the worst of people, I think that's it's damaging. It's not good. You're failing your mission as a Christian, right? So I don't know. Anyway, that's my 2 cents.
I would certainly agree with that. I think there are ways to do things. That doesn't mean to say that you know, every time you're talking to someone who doesn't believe that you're out to convert them. I wouldn't want anybody to think that any conversation with me, I had an ulterior motive in it. I have conversations for the sake of finding things out, understanding people, and there isn't that hidden agenda. Because I think the gospel message has made its way around the world. In this day and age, we have television, telephones, internet, all the rest of it. We don't need to go trogging out there and spreading the gospel message by going from village to village, town to town, etc. The message is out there. I think maybe our job now is to explain it to those who've heard it and may not have understood it. And if all you do when someone seems to not understand it is say, you're stupid, you don't understand this, you're going to hell, then you get nowhere fast. It's worse than trying to go along on your bicycle playing your trombone. So, and going back to, and Jade had mentioned about the most important commandments is to love God and to love other people, or to love your neighbour as yourself. And then from the Good Samaritan, you find out who your neighbour is, and it's basically anybody, given that Jews and Samaritans detested each other, and yet it was the Samaritan that was the neighbour of the Jew. I think what it comes down to, and I'll just finish on this line and then go off here, that I think for the way that Christ taught us that we have to live our lives, what we should be trying to do, the modern way of putting it is, don't be a dick to other people. I think that's it. Treat them the way you want to be treated. And when you fall short, hold up your hands and apologise. And I think if maybe if more of us went through our lives attempting to do that, and I wish I could do it much more often than I do, then life might be a little bit easier. And with that, I shall say good night. Say good night, ladies.
Good night.
Good night.